Thanks for tuning in to the Just Go Play podcast, where we look to develop and promote a positive youth sports experience. As always, we are available for speaking and private engagements and can be reached at info@justgoplay.ca. You can also catch full video versions of our podcast on our YouTube channel. And don't forget to visit us at justgoplay.ca. Enjoy the episode. Hello, and welcome to the Just Go Play podcast. I'm Daryl Devonish, and we have another amazing episode. Today, we're talking to the last pillar of the Community Revitalization Project. Got that's a mouthful. And we were with Taryn Lipschitz, and she's going to be talking about communications today. My host is going to be Matt Young. He's back in his chair. But today, Taryn is in the hot seat. And Taryn is responsible for communications. Taryn, how you guys doing? Matt, how you guys doing? Everyone good?
Great, Daryl. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to talk about communications with the Community Revitalization Project.
Nice. Matt, you good?
Yeah, great, Daryl. Great to be back.
Ooh, in the right chair. You're in the right chair. All right. So again, let's take the gloves off. We're not going to be shy today with you, Taryn. First thing, you know what? Can you just give a quick intro or basically a little background on why you're sitting at the front of the room here today and why, you know, your role with the Community Revitalization Project and, you know, that pillar that you're covering?
For sure.
Communications. We'll start there.
So my background and how I got to the seat that I'm sitting in now is I actually got my business degree from Western. I went to Ivy. And following that, instead of the normal route of going into accounting, consulting, marketing, or finance, I decided to go into the advertising route. So I spent over a decade working in advertising, starting in the digital side, whether it would be email campaigns, social media, website build, app build, anything digital was really cool. And then I started working above the line into radio, TV, print campaigns, influencer campaigns, making my way eventually also into sports sponsorships, which was a really fun area. I decided to leave the advertising industry in 2018 to take a step back. I finished becoming a certified nutrition practitioner, so I'm also a nutritionist. And from that, I decided to start working on my own. I found this really great little niche of helping, you know, wellness entrepreneurs and small businesses with their marketing and their communication and their business strategy, because they can't really afford a big agency, but they need some of the guidance and the experience from that perspective. So what's been really great is taking all that learning and knowledge and bringing it into an area that I'm really passionate about. And through that, you know, connecting with you, connecting with Matt, and really understanding the importance of communication in a community and within the education, parks and recreation, and youth sports pillars, really bringing them together and kind of adding that additional cherry on top. Let's say, you know, we've talked about this in multiple podcasts around the Community Revitalization Project, but within each pillar, there's a lot of operational issues that need to be fixed. Once you've really fixed the process and the flow and all of that, you then need to figure out, well, how are we going to start communicating, whether it's internally or externally? And the reason this is really a passion for me is I immigrated to Canada when I was 5. And so I grew up in Parks and Rec. You know, I came to this country, we knew nobody, and I had a lot of energy, and my mom was just like, put this kid in sports, put her in a program. We needed to also integrate into the community and make friends and build a new network. Throughout all of my time in school, we had gym class, physical education, and through that, there was a lot of sport exposure and fundamental skills building, which I've then taken through life, and, you know, even in my 30s, picked up floor hockey because of my love for being active. And I'm really fortunate that I had the opportunity, because my parents always believed in us being active and in sports, that I was in a ton of different sports growing up. I was in soccer, gymnastics, karate, competitive swimming, competitive diving, boxing, hip hop, badminton, volleyball. I'm probably missing a couple even, but so passionate because I saw the benefits of being in sports, whether it was competence to then pick up skills and enjoy sport later on in life or activity, or just confidence in who I am as a person. team building, how to work with people, which is such an important life skill. And then, the importance of a culture, like how to surround yourself with great people, how you fit into the puzzle. And I think a lot of people want that sense of community. And that was really important to me, immigrating to a new country. I've moved around a couple times. I've lived in Chicago. I've lived in Hong Kong. I've been in Toronto over 10 years. So there's sort of a professional and a personal interest on how I got into the CRP.
Wow.
Amazing. And Daryl, I just want to say, first of all, you talk about diamonds in the rough, and we were really appreciative of you introducing us to Taryn. And, listening to her talk, what strikes me the most, Taryn, is the range that you have. And, we often see people with a very narrow scope of expertise, which isn't bad. I mean, you kind of go through life, you go through the process, and you're put in this, and this is your track, and this is your place. But just the range of expertise and experience that you bring, and skill sets that you bring to the revitalization project is quite frankly, it's going to be the difference between a project being average, good, and great. And that's really what we're going to talk about today, is organizations and the need for that particular person or expertise or skill set or support, because just what you said, you can be doing some great things, but how do we message that? How does that reach the end audience, the clients, the consumers, the athletes, etc.? So one of the things I wanted to ask you about before Daryl launches into all of his questions, because I want people to get a good perspective of some of the work that you've done, is you talked about sponsorships, sports sponsorships. And can you tell us a little bit about some of the sports sponsorship pieces that you worked on, and how they made you feel, how they did, and kind of how that set the wheels in motion for you really going, this is the vertical and space that I want to be in?
For sure. It's a great question. So there's two that I'll talk about. One is I actually worked with Manulife, which you think insurance, you don't necessarily think sports sponsorship, but they've actually become, a few years ago, the title sponsor for the Ride for Heart here in Toronto. They do a ton of work around sponsoring big events. And, a lot of companies, they're like, oh, well, you're just putting your, giving money to put your name on something. But at the end of the day, you need these sponsorships, because otherwise these events can't happen. The awareness isn't built, and the money doesn't go towards whatever cause that it needs to go towards. So it was really amazing to work with them on not only the Ride for Heart, but they also partnered with Participaction a couple years ago for Canada's 150 playlist. So we executed events in multiple cities and communities across the country, bringing back that love and that fun back into activity. I think a lot of people too, when you're like, get active, get moving, they think workouts, workout programs, all of that. But a lot of the time too, it's around having fun with your kids and going for a bike ride and going skiing and trying just different activities. So that was a really fun one I worked on. My role was really managing the team on the execution of the sponsorship. So working with both sides of the client and building the creative, building the experience, and making sure that it happened. And I think one thing that's really important for me is the experience. No matter whether it's a campaign, whether it's a youth sport program, whether it's in school, the experience that you have is so important, because it's your opportunity to kind of like, I don't want to say make or break, but you can change someone's life. The other one that I'm going to talk about is that I'm really passionate about. So Dairy Farmers of Canada was my client for a few years, and they really believe in supporting people to stay and be active in sports. And for a long time, we actually had a program called Fueling Women Champions. And the focus of that was to be around keeping and encouraging women and girls to stay in sports. 95% of sponsorship goes towards males, 5% of that goes towards females. So it's a bit of a struggle to get people to come and watch females play. And, without seeing other female role models, how do girls then look up and say, that could be me one day, or I could be a hockey player, I could be a rugby player, I can be a mom and a lawyer and a curling champion. So we actually worked with the Canadian Women's Hockey League at the time, Rugby Canada, Swimming Canada, CAUSE, which is a research arm around this, and individual athletes as well. A really great program called Fast and Female, which works with Olympians to go into communities and do programs for girls. So put a ton of money around that. We managed all the sponsorship, all the events, all the promotion around it. And, as a female who's seen the benefits of staying in sports from a confidence, from a professional perspective, it was something I was really, really passionate about. And unfortunately, I don't think the program's going on anymore because, again, programs like this, you need the funding. But they really tried to go into communities and make an impact.
Wow.
Fantastic. Love it. Thanks for sharing.
Listen, you say passionate. I hope our audience senses your passion for what you do. Side note, I have to thank you, Taryn, because in the last, I'd say, year or so, you've helped me with my communication. And I feel like I've grown tenfold since you've worked with me. So side note, thank you. And you're so humble. We could probably, just like Matt, we could probably do a whole podcast on the stuff you've worked on. All right, let's change gears. Back to the Community Revitalization Project. Why does this project need communications? Like, I get the other pillars; they stand alone. But why is it so important for this project to have a communications pillar?
It's a great question, Daryl. So part of it is that without communications, how are people going to be able to talk together? So it's almost like if you had people sitting at the table, 5 different people who work in the organization who all speak different languages, one person speaking German, one speaking Mandarin, Spanish, English, French, Italian. Where's the translator to make sure that you all know what you're talking about? And that's sort of communications. It's getting people to sit at the table and have the conversation together. So it's aligning people on the vision, the mission, the goals, understanding who you are as a brand from that perspective, as an organization. So understanding how you can better communicate what you're doing. Because a lot of people, you and Matt can speak to this as well. You're doing great things and you're so passionate, but you don't know how to communicate it externally. And that's where I think a lot of people struggle is, you might be a personal trainer or a coach and be so passionate about what you do, but you don't necessarily know how to say to people in 30 seconds, here's how I'm going to change your life. And here's my service offering. And here's why you need to work with me. So part of it is building that communication framework and the foundation for people. And then part of it is giving them the framework to actually communicate with the other stakeholders. So Matt talked about youth sports last week, how the athletes and the kids are actually the stakeholders, which is a great example of how are you as the coach communicating with athletes, with parents, with the administrators, with organizations. So part of the communication pillar is putting those frameworks into place to make it really easy. The reality is that most people in the Parks and Recreation, Education, and Youth Sport pillar don't have a marketing and communication background. They have an education background, or they have some sort of passion around community or coaching or fitness, health, whatever that might be. So they don't necessarily think like a marketer or think like a communicator. And that's where, I could ask you guys the questions. What have you seen the biggest impact on your businesses in terms of communication?
Yeah, Taryn, great commentary.
Yes.
Or worse, they think they're a marketer and communicator,
That's
and that's actually even worse than not believing they're a good marketer and communicator. So before we answer that question, and Daryl can speak and I can speak, I want to go back to something that you said, because we talk about culture a lot. We talk about vision, mission, goals, and objectives. For our audience, what are the biggest gaps you see, or biggest opportunities? Let's put the positive spin on it. Biggest opportunities you see, my first question, in communicating that, in the communication and marketing of the culture. What are some of the gaps? Because that's something that organizations, people that are listening to, could take and immediately go, okay, I need some support around that. So what are those gaps in your opinion?
Okay, so you asked me first the gaps, then the opportunities. So I'll address both. I think what's interesting is when you have the stakeholders at the table and you align on your vision, your mission, your values, and your goals on one piece of paper, and everyone looks at them and says, yes, this is who we are. You all of a sudden have this more vested interest. And if you look, then you have something to look through the lens. So everything you do should go through that lens of, does this ladder up to our vision, our mission, our values, and our goals? And then you need to start speaking about them, and you need to tell everyone. So, inclusion is a really important one that I think is in all three of these pillars as well. How are you talking about that? How are you acting on that? How are you as an organization going to manage that? But I think it starts with getting the people at the table. I think that's always the biggest gap, is you have a disconnect between the people who start the company or run the organization and then the grassroots people who are actually in the implementation. So you need to make sure everyone's aligned and then working together. It's like last week you talked about the franchisee-franchisor model. If you don't have the goals of everyone clearly outlined, then you're not working together. And I think the cohesion and almost the support of each other is really important. So that's what I'd kind of say is the biggest opportunity, is to make sure you're very clear on that, and everything you do sticks to that.
Yeah, and so well put. And I'm not going to steal Daryl's silo thunder, because he's talked about that a lot, and he's probably going to ask that question. Instead, I'm going to go, so what do you say to people, devil's advocate? Oh, Taryn, we don't have time to do that. We don't have the resources to do that. The season's on, it's starting. Parks and Rec, our programs are starting next week. School's coming back in September. I just came off August long weekend. We've got so much stuff to do, and we don't have time to do all this. What do you say to the people that give you that? Question number one. Question number two is, how do you then in the revitalization project not only get that dialed up per pillar, but actually then bring all of those three pillars together, so there's that flow and pathway that you talked about? So two questions.
Okay, so the first one is, people will say they don't have time. You can always make time for things. And the reality is, the way we've built the program is, you give me half a day, one day with the whole team, you will be 10 steps ahead of where you are today. If you don't sit down and have those important conversations today, well, you're just going to stay in this cycle of not making positive change. And, the good example I'll use is if you're a startup business, you're going to have to invest a lot to be able to then have this amazing business one day. So I think people need to start thinking about it that way, is I also need to invest. I need to spend the 2 days or 2 hours a week reading or working with my team and collaborating. And the benefit is there down the line. So if you don't stop and make the change now, well, you're going to keep having the same issues. It's the same as the operation issues. If you don't fix them and take the time, you're just going to keep having them. So it's like being in a broken relationship. It's like you're just going to keep breaking up and getting back together, and the relationship's not going to bloom.
That's a good example. And in the youth sport sector, before we get to your second question, when people ask that, you and through learning from you, I always say that's like a player coming and saying, I don't need to practice. I just want to show up to the games. And you're going to be having that conversation. You're going to spend way more time having the conversation because you didn't show up to practice, because you didn't put the work in on the front end. So I really like those examples for our audience who just say, well, this sounds all good, but we don't have the budget. We don't have the money. You don't have the budget and money not to do this. And especially, as we come back from the return to play, that's going to be a key feature. Okay, so that was the first question. Do you remember the second question?
Yes, I wrote it down. But I 100% agree with what you said. I think the hardest part is, and I know we'll probably get to this and this isn't answering your question yet, but one of the biggest barriers is people going to say, oh, I don't have time and the money to invest in it now. You can always find the time and the money. There's time, money, resources, and it's this ongoing triangle. So if you have one part of your triangle that's breaking, well, the other two are going to break too. So you got to make sure you're supporting all of it. So then going back into, you asked me, in the Community Revitalization Project, how is communications helping pillars, and then how is it bringing it together? So I think what's really great is, while it might seem very daunting and overwhelming, especially if you're a volunteer coach and you're doing this while working full time and taking care of your other kids, and now you all of a sudden have to do communication, it's overwhelming. We take communication, we take the overwhelming part away, and we say, here's the frameworks, here's your template, here's what you need to say. And all of a sudden, all that thinking about, is this right, isn't this right, is gone. We've given you the exact framework of what to do, what to say, tips and tricks, everything. So I think that's the one part, is within each of those pillars, we've added in the communication piece so that it's not missing. And then I think what's really important is whether we're working in a community with one pillar and then hopefully working with all of them, we're getting people to talk in the same language. All of the pillars are structured in the same 4 tenets, so that when you're working with the sports pillar, you understand that there's a section around discipline project management. Then you go to Parks and Recreation, and there's a discipline project management pillar as well, bucket that you're working with. So it's very systematic that whether you're in one or all of them, you're going to sit together and be able to have that same conversation. And all of a sudden now as a community have an even stronger message. And you can all of a sudden say, our collective impact is this for the community. And this is how we've invested, the changes we made, and the economic benefits that we've seen. So I hope that answered.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
That's one of the best answers I've ever heard. All right, Taryn, my turn. So this sounds all good, but I see barriers. And I know I'm going to ask you what you think some of the barriers are. One of the barriers I'm going to talk about is how these different pillars, they kind of work in silos. Well, at least in my own experience, they kind of work in silos. The youth sports, they got their thing going on. The Parks and Recs, they have their thing. Education. How are you going to get these guys to talk? And what does that look like? Because everybody, they all need to survive now, especially after this pandemic. We return to play. The youth sports, they're gonna need their people. Parks and Recs are gonna need their people, keep their jobs. Education, well, education can be education. They're still gonna be around, but they also need to stay relevant. How are you going to get these guys all to sort of talk and work together?
I think it's going to be really interesting, Daryl. I think what's interesting is, you've been a trainer and a coach for over 30 years. You have so much experience. It's so much easier to get people to work together once they've gone through it and they can see the success. So even if we only work with one pillar at a time, which is what I think is going to happen, because I think it's going to be really hard to bring those people to the table initially. Let's say we're working with a youth sports pillar. Once they start going through it and they see the benefit, they're going to want to talk to the schools, and they're going to say, this has worked for us. You need to do it because this is how we're going to work together even better. So I think it's going to be all of a sudden, you've got these champions, you've got these communities, you've got these pillars who go through the process, go through the frameworks, and then can advocate for it because they see why they need to do it and why the collective impact will only work if everyone works together. I think it's going to be really hard and rare for us to go into a community and have those people at the table. I think within each pillar, just getting the stakeholders in that pillar at the table is going to be tough. And I think what's great about our team is we have the experience, the deep experience in each of those pillars. We know the barriers, we know who we're talking to, and we're willing to take the time to help those champions in each pillar get the stakeholders at the table. And if we need to have 5 conversations with them, or we need to have 30 conversations, our team's happy to, because we know that the investment they're going to make in each pillar will change the game for them down the line. So I think the big barrier is just getting people slowly at the table. I think, we've talked about this a lot. There's a lot of campaigns out there. There's over $30 billion spent a year in the healthcare industry. Globally, there's over $48 billion spent in the sports industry. There's so much money being spent on talking. And it'd be interesting to see, well, of those billions of dollars, how much is actually being done? How much of that investment in marketing is making an impact? What is the return on it? We're going in, and from a communication perspective, I also want to clarify, we're not going in and saying, we're going to come up with a marketing campaign for you. What we're doing is saying, we're going to clean up your marketing and your communications internally and externally. You don't have to put any other money on top of that, but we want you to be talking better. We want you guys to have a better experience. So all of a sudden, if a park and recreation has better communication with their clients, their, the parents and the kids coming, all of a sudden you're going to start attracting more. You're going to be able to retain, and you're going to be able to grow. So I think that's a
No,
long-winded answer, but
again, here's what I'm hearing. There's enough food for everybody, right? So once you get one of these groups on board, they're going to see the mutual benefit that we're going to feed each other, guys. So this is kind of, is that kind of what you're relaying?
Yeah, 100%, Daryl, because it's here's the pie. Well, right now the pie's rotting. We're not baking fresh pies. We all need to come together and make this a better pie and then a bigger pie. You know, the moment you have active kids who are healthier, who are happier, you have a healthier and happier community, and hopefully inspiring parents and adults and siblings and aunts and uncles and grandparents to be healthier as well. So you have a more productive community as well. And all of a sudden, if you have a happier, healthier community, that productivity then goes into other things like, you know, dealing with homelessness issues or, you know, other things. You can take that energy and I think that's what's always why I'm so passionate about health and being active is if you feel better about yourself, you then want to go help others and do more, whether it's being better in your job or showing up for your family. I think a lot of people miss the mental health connection with physical activity and how that connects to the bigger community wellness.
And so Taryn, you've talked about the connection, the physical mental connection. You're in communications. You've undoubtedly heard, you know, this same talk that you're saying millions of times. Where do you think that peoples and communities and populations are missing? What do we have to communicate the benefits of quality daily physical education, a robust parks and rec program, and quality youth sports? You know, why do you think it is we have to communicate that so loudly? And do you think we have to communicate that differently for people to actually gravitate towards it and believe it? Do you think you know, you're just going to be mentally healthier? Do you think we're doing enough justice or making enough impact with that, with those types of statements? Or what do you think we need to do to really shore that up so people can actually buy in?
I think what's really interesting is when you go through school, you have physical education as a class, and you have science, and you have math, and you have all these different classes, but nowhere in the systems that I've seen is there any point where we talk about the relationship between mental health or how your mental health changes as you develop as well through adolescence into teenage years, you know, through teenage years into adolescence, because that does change. You know, what your mental capacity is when you're a kid changes later on in life. I don't think it's taught anywhere, is what I'm trying to say. I don't think there's anywhere that we really ingrain it in people. And maybe what we do right now is we do talk about it, but there's no action behind it. So I do feel like there's still that gap of connecting the dots. You know, I've seen so many campaigns where it's like, you need your 60 minutes of physical activity a day. Well, a lot of people will sit there and go, well, why? I'd rather just sit and play video games or watch TV or be on TikTok. I think people are still missing it. I think there hasn't been that connection through life and through the more holistic approach.
And so is your plan to start helping communities tell these stories? Is your plan to reach down and grab somebody who did make that decision and say, you know, how are you feeling before you did this and how are you feeling now? Or where were you as a community before you started across all of these metrics? I mean, I know in the project we're pretty bullish on actual metrics so that they're tangibles, not just anecdotal evidence. What's your strategy? What's the strategy of the project to really tell that story outwardly? Because, you know, I get the internally, you've done a good job of describing that, but then there's the outward. How do we share, or how do you plan to share that outwardly?
Mm-hmm. And part of it is, you know, we do have measurements in place that each pillar will be using, and frequency of doing that, because, you know, it's the same as any program that you're doing with kids. You're going to measure them before, midway, and at the end, so they can see their individual progress. That development's really important. So we're going to do the same thing for every single program that we're doing, every single person that we work with. Has your job been made easier? Do you feel like you're getting useful information? I think part of it too is, you know, a parks and recreation program might be doing a great job with the kids, but the parents have no idea what's going on. And that's missing. If you're not communicating to the parents and saying, hey, your kids need to learn these life skills, swimming, running, throwing, catching, because of this, if you don't give them the connection, they're not going to think it's worth it, and they're not going to keep bringing their kid back, especially if, you know, a lot of people don't have a lot of money to invest in this. Why would they throw $300, $600, $1,200 at their kids being in programs if they don't know what the value is?
And so how do you make that easier? How do you make that easier for Parks and Rec, for physical education teachers, for youth sport organizations? How do you specifically make that easier? Like what's your offering? Just so people know.
Part of it is taking the important information and packaging it in ways people can message it, and saying, here is the important message, whether you want to tailor it a little bit because your company likes to add exclamation marks, or you like to use a certain word, you know, like there's going to be the nuances, but we're going to give them the core information to send out. And we're going to give them the framework of, as a program is going on, let's say week 2, kids are learning how to catch, parents are going to get an email on what is the importance of learning how to throw and catch a ball. How is this going to help kids later in life? So now you're also layering on that education. And I think education is power, knowledge is power. And what we haven't done a good job is giving people that education and knowledge so that they feel empowered with what they're doing.
So can an organization come to you and say, hey, listen, I want an hour of your time to review what our strategy should be? Are you giving templates, or you know, are you telling people how to and how not to use different social media channels, or, you know, this is how you go get sponsorship in the community? What is the scope? What is the breadth of the plan?
Everything you listed.
Oh, nice.
So what's great is, you know, different communities and different pillars are going to have different challenges. And what's great is, you know, you mentioned it earlier, I do have quite a breadth of experience across everything, whether it was working with organizations or building brands myself, understanding what is their need. So there's going to be, the communications pillar is going to have frameworks that give them the overview of how to build that organizational alignment, how to get stakeholders aligned on what the mission, vision, values, and goals are of the company, how to communicate that internally, externally, what the frequency of emails versus social media posting versus internal communication should be, what are the key points you need within those. And what's great about the model that we've built with CRP is we're also available for, you know, we're almost a resource as an extension of their team. If you say, hey, Taryn, love the framework, we've implemented it, and now we want additional help. Well, whether you need 1 hour of my time, whether you need 6 hours of my time, we've worked with the team on the need. If you want me to come in for a day and train people or do presentations on specific topics that are related to your pillar and your situation, we do that. And you know, I don't want to say it's just me. I want to say also within every pillar, we do that as well. So it's just because communications is also tying the 3 together, it's almost looking at it from the holistic view as well.
Now this sounds too good to be true. So what is the guarantee that you've made to your CRP team that you won't go work somewhere else and that you'll actually stay with them when some bigwig comes to hire you for marketing and communications for their entire NSO or NGB?
You know what's interesting is I worked in the corporate world, and then I quit for a reason. I quit because I wanted to help people and companies I'm passionate about. And I'm invested in the CRP. I'm part of the team, and I have no plans to go anywhere.
That's good.
Wave a huge paycheck in front of me, and
Everybody's heard that.
It doesn't matter to me. I think, you know, I'm pretty fortunate. I had some life experiences that kind of made me look and reevaluate things in my life. And I have values. I wrote these down on a piece of paper 2 years ago. What is my mission, my vision, and my values for myself and for my growth? And it would be very hard for me to walk away. And I think what's great is, you know, hopefully in a year, we're sitting here and we're saying we have 100 communities on board. And the great thing is, I think there's a lot of people who are passionate just like me, who have a bit of a marketing background, who have a bit of a sport background, who want to be part of the team. So the idea too is to grow our team and have more Taryns and more Matts and more Nates and Mikes and Elisas and Darryls, and build this bigger network so that if we do have 10 communities in 1 week who all need help with communications, well, each one of them gets their own person helping them. So, my vision too is growing this team, training people to continue to do this great work and go in communities and support them.
Love it.
That's awesome.
So at 15, 20 minutes ago, you asked a question to us, how has marketing and communication, helped us? So Daryl, how has Taryn's skill set helped you in your business? You go first, because I've been talking a lot. So
yeah. Oh, we need another podcast for this. T has taken me, like, I didn't know where I was, or I wasn't good at communicating what I did to people. In fact, I didn't know I knew what I did, but I couldn't put it in words. I couldn't share it with the with the outsiders, the external world. And T basically sat me down, had me focus in on what I was doing and what I was trying to accomplish, what I was good at, and what direction I wanted to go in. And my life has changed. I speak differently. I'm way more, 10 times more focused than I was a year ago in terms of where I'm going and what I'm trying to accomplish with my group, with my team. So that's what T has done for me. And if she does even a quarter of this for some of the communities, it's going to be outstanding, because I can't even, I'm one person. This is taking a community and blowing it up. So I would have to say she's given me a framework that I can work in daily, weekly, monthly, and we have goals, and we have a calendar. Like, just, I've never been this organized in my life.
that's beauty. Love it.
Yeah. So that's what Taryn has done. And like I said, if she gets to your community and she's working with your pillar, like, you're gonna
look out.
You're in trouble.
Yeah.
Right. She's gonna blow it up. Now, on that note, I want to ask T, which pillar do you think would probably be the easiest one to fit with communications? Is there one that's going to be more beneficial to approach first, or just whoever's willing to take your help? You think all of them equally? Which pillar do you think would be the easiest one for you to connect with?
You know what, Daryl? I think what's interesting is communication's ingrained in each of them. I think the pillar that's going to need the most work coming out of COVID, and as we start, rebuilding this new normal, is going to be Parks and Recreation, because I think their budgets are going to be cut so significantly. I think education, like you mentioned earlier, schools are still open, teachers are still having jobs. I think they have a lot of other things they need to prioritize before this. I think youth sports, Matt mentioned last week, there's a lot of people who are privileged enough to be able to afford that. So once those start opening up, kids will be back in. I think Parks and Recreation are going to struggle because they're typically funded by governments or from different avenues. And if that funding next year is supposed to be cut 30%, well, now they really need to show the value and the benefit of why they're needed and why they need money and why they need staff. And I think what's really important to remember with Parks and Recreation is a lot of the times their best value is in low income neighborhoods. So if you're stripping those neighborhoods with programming for parents and kids and those in the community, well, where are they going to put that time? What are they going to start doing? Is violence going to go up? Are crimes going to go up? So I think just some of that will be Parks and Recreation are going to need the most help. Will they have the money? That's going to be tough. But like Matt, you've kind of said earlier, you can always find the money, whether it's grants, whether it's private donors, whether it's corporate sponsorship. What a huge opportunity for some big brands to come out and work with us to sponsor communities and help them. So, the Nikes of the world, the Reeboks, the Hockey Canada, Hockey USA, like whatever organization, they can come out and sponsor a community and say, here's the money, let's make change.
Wow. You know what? This is brilliant. My next question is, this is so smart that you guys have made communications a pillar. Why hasn't this been done before? Like, I don't know, it seems so obvious, but why hasn't this been done before?
So that's a good question. I'm going to actually ask Matt to answer it because he's the one who has seen the biggest gap in this.
Well, we just talked about this the other day, which is why Taryn, I'm sure you're passing this to me. And Daryl, you and I talked about this as an entire podcast. So when you look at the landscape of how do we assess things, we've got the researchers. So we had a great talk yesterday with a fellow. It was a PhD student from Ohio State University, and we were rolling through the Community Revitalization Project with him, and he's like, "This is brilliant. This is a game changer." Because really you guys have filled a position that has been vacant for so long. And I said, how so? And he goes, well, you're transcribing the information. You're transcribers. And I said, well, transcribers, what do you mean? He goes, well, we got the researchers, and everyone does the research and says, here's the problem. Here's the problem. Nike designed to move 45 million global study, $45 million global study on what's going on, research. Then we have the synthesizers, and the synthesizers are all those, I don't want to use the word suckerfish, but they're like suckerfish on the sharks. So the researchers are the sharks. That's where everyone wants to be. Then you got the synthesizers who say, well, Daryl just researched that. Now I'm going to take Daryl's information and I'm going to have a summit and I'm going to say, this is what Daryl said. And I'm going to put it in my words. I'm going to nuance it. I'm going to try to make it mine. So the synthesizers then take what the researchers said and they sell it to consumers. Okay, because God bless researchers, they're not really good salespeople, because they're in their box and it has to be very linear. Like we talked about Taryn's range. I mean, that's someone who could be a synthesizer. So the synthesizers then sell it to the consumers. So you got 15% researchers, you got about 35% synthesizers, you got 45% consumers, but where are the transcribers? And that's only about 5% of the people. So the transcribers are the people that take that information from the research and synthesizers and actually help the consumer action it. So we've all heard about the summits, and Daryl, your term has actually made it North American wide, the warm shower summits. Okay, every year, same thing. This is what we need to do. To the beginning of this whole podcast with Taryn, it's like we're talking about the SOS, same old. And nothing changes because there's not that transcriber who has the experience, who has the range, who has the patience, who has the knowledge and expertise to go, okay, this is a really big chunk for you. Here's how we can make it bite-sized. And that's what Taryn has done with that communications piece and communications template. So Daryl, your question, why hasn't it been done? Because we overlook the importance of actually communicating it. And we overlook the importance of that step that goes, okay, now we've done all this great work. Wait a second. How do we communicate it? How do we onboard people internally? How do we engage people externally? We just forget about it because it's not in our wheelhouse. It's not in our experience. It's not in our wheelhouse. It's not even in our psychology. And so I think that is really where this gets lost to your question, Daryl. Why hasn't it been done before? Because people get so excited about their own project that that's all they care about is their own project, not about how do we help you communicate your version of this project to your stakeholders.
Wow. I hope people are listening to that answer because that's huge. And that makes so much sense to me. And why we are where we are. There's no one transcribing it for them. And that's why the role you guys are playing as a community revitalization project is so huge, is because we have the information, we have tons of information, but we don't know how to apply it. And until we learn how to apply this stuff and make it relevant and useful that people can go and use it tomorrow, we're going to be stuck in the same place.
And we do the same thing. We go right from consumer back to researcher, synthesizer, consumer, back to research, synthesizer, consumer.
Yeah.
New campaign, next year, new order.
And I really understand what a campaign is now. It's missing that last final piece.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
I'd say too, like my biggest pet peeve in life is people who just talk the talk and they don't walk the walk. If you're going to talk it, you've got to walk it. So I think there always needs to be action. You know, you can sit at the table and have this great discussion, but unless you're going to go and then cascade that and do something and engage people and make change, then who's got time to just have conversations?
Are you referring to like an all-white male NSO board? He talks about inclusivity and diversity with their all-white male, over 50-year-old male board.
Yeah.
Or are you talking something else? Yeah, I agree. And there's lots of opportunity. And I think it's a great opportunity for us to visit that now that this is happening, because there's a light shed on it. So it's a great opportunity. And we always said this before we get into our first steps there. I know that's where you want to head here. But, you know, this is the opportunity to really take a look at this and evaluate it, because you're not in the business. And Taryn, if I could answer the question that you asked to Daryl and we heard about how you helped him. The communications piece was really how, you know, we worked on the business instead of just being in the business. When we started off, we were just in it. We thought that everyone just knew, like Daryl said, what was happening, how to do things, how to train people, how to sell, how to do everything. They didn't. We had to go work on our internal communications so that we could better communicate what we were doing externally. And now with this pause, this is a great time to do that, because, you know, this is a great time to work on your business when you don't have the distractions of next tournament, this, that, this, you know. So you want to be productive. You want to show your stakeholders and your boss that you're still doing stuff and you're preparing for a better next step. So that's it's great. But anyway, Daryl, next steps.
Okay, next steps.
We're here.
Who are we starting with?
Taryn, obviously, it's her show.
Taryn, your show. Next steps. What can people immediately out there in the community do, or how do they get a hold of you? All that stuff. Let us know what's the next steps here.
And with and without the CRP, because not everyone's going to want to do that. So let's be fair. And let's, you know, with the project and your expertise, and even on their own.
Yeah. So I'd say with the project, let's start with that. You go to rebuildthecommunity.com. We're there. Contact us. We will set up a call, talk to you about everything you need to know, and help you get those stakeholders at the table. We're on Twitter. We're on LinkedIn. You can find our team everywhere. In terms of people who don't necessarily have the resources to use a CRP, I'd say get the stakeholders at the table and just start the conversation and talk about what is our mission, what is our vision, what are our values, and what are our goals. If you can get everyone to align on that, well, you're like 10 steps further than you started, because there's actually what you're going to find out, what you're going to uncover is not everyone's going to have the same thought in their head. So I'd say start with that, figure those out, and then figure out how you then want to make sure everyone who's involved in the organization knows about them and knows that you're not just saying them, but you're doing them. So if inclusion and diversity is a value of yours, how are you actually doing that? How are you making sure kids feel included in every program? How are you making sure that your program is accessible to everyone? So I'd say that's a good way for people to just start is take a step, you know, you have this time, take a step back, look at the organization and say, what are we doing here?
Love it. Matt, your next step.
Yeah, my next steps, not to replicate anything that was just said by Taryn, would be really to look for people with that range. I mean, I love how this conversation started off, you know, and the experience that Taryn brings to this communication. So if you're a small organization and you're looking for people to fill roles, Parks and Rec, physical education, or the youth sports system, look for people that have a range of experience rather than someone who's just done one thing and one thing only, because that range of experience gives you so much value. And to be able to have people who can offer different perspectives and bring different things to the table, I think that's key. That's my first step, number one. Second step, you know, number two is make sure that marketing and communications are at the table for discussion in anything that you're doing. In physical education, quality daily physical education. You know, Taryn already reviewed the fact that we don't value that. Why? Because we're not communicating it very well of the value. We're not communicating that value well. We're not letting the kids communicate that value to their parents, to their teachers, to their superintendents. We're letting the adults dictate that value. And I think that's a missed opportunity. Parks and Rec, you know, Taryn hit the nail on the head with Parks and Rec. Those are really integral to the community. Let's not cut those out and then go, hey, why is all this truancy happening? Why is the crime rate gone up? Why is the sedentary, the diabetes, why has that happened? Let's not wait till after the fact and react. Let's get on the front of that and go, hey, and take a role. What is happening? I want to know. This is my community. I want to know what's happening with this community. What is being done? What fundraisers are being done? What can we do to make sure that these integral community parks and rec pillars are not going away anytime soon? And then, of course, the youth sports sector, we always say it, see something, say something, make sure that we are communicating what our expectations are as parents. But on the flip side, the organizations, like Taryn said, what is the vision, mission, values? Are you living them? Be honest with yourself. So the first step for those organizations is to be honest with yourself. Do we have a vision, mission, values that actually reflect 2020? And are we living them? 2 easy questions to ask, yes or no. And let's poll all of our, constituents, stakeholders, and let them help answer the question, because quite often, let's be honest, we're not honest with ourselves. So those will be the 2 first steps that I would have.
Yeah, and you know what, Matt, I love what you said. I think now is the time where people need to step back and be authentic and be honest. And if I can add to my, if I had another next step, I'll say, question things. Look at things and say, what is working? What's not working? Why is it not working? I think if you're a parent, ask the coaches the questions or ask the school the questions. I think the problem is so many people are just silent because they don't think if they say something, there will be a change. And that's the biggest misconception. I think that's, you just assume things are the way they are for a reason. Well, a lot of the time these systems were built years and decades ago, and there's been no change because nobody questions it. Mm-hmm. And I think now's the time. Stand up and say, this isn't right. Question things.
Brilliant. Daryl, you got the scraps.
Yeah. So you know what, you guys, I always get the scraps. I get nothing left. So I'm not going to repeat everything. But what I've taken, this is the final piece in the Community Revitalization Today project is Taryn's piece, the communications piece. And if you're a community out there, it's time, as he said, it's time to take inventory. This is the time. Is our system broken? Are we on the same page? It's time to revisit that. There's a lot of communities that are just in motion. There's lots of motion, and you're keeping busy, you're keeping your job. Time, again, stop being a secret agent. It's time to take action. No more motion. Motion, you look busy and you look like things are happening. But in reality, things aren't going down the way you want them or the way they should be. It's time to take action. And if you're listening to this podcast, please share this with your friends, stakeholders in the neighborhood that can do something, make an impact. And don't be silent, guys. We can't be secret agents anymore. We've seen what's happened with what happens when you're a secret agent. Things just continue as they are. Okay, so you don't want to be kicking yourself saying, I listened to this great podcast about some people that were going to make some real change and they're here to help people, and I didn't do anything. This is the time. If you know better, do better. That's all I got to say. So guys, thank you. Taryn, you're awesome today. Thank you, Matt. You're always good. That's the show. Please share this podcast if you like it. We're looking for some more subscribers. We need more people talking about this stuff, guys. More people. And on that note, just go play. Thanks, guys.